I am Leonor, and I was there. Before childhood was seen as something to be protected, before toys on the floor, before colorful rooms and bedtime stories, I was there when being a child did not mean being cared for. It only meant being small, too small to understand the world, but already big enough to be swallowed by it.
Today you associate childhood with care, learning, and discovery. But for a very long time, childhood was only a brief pause between being born and becoming useful. There was no idea of a special phase, no idea of preservation, only the urgency of shaping someone who could survive. Many children died before they even learned to speak properly. Simple fevers, small infections, diarrhea, untreated wounds, everything could be fatal. And families knew this. They learned early that loving too deeply often meant suffering too deeply. Parents loved their children, yes, but they loved carefully. Because loving someone who might disappear at any moment was a constant form of torment. In some places, children were only given names after surviving their first months. Before that, they were almost a possibility, not a certainty. Naming too early meant recognizing a life that might not endure. And as soon as a child could stand and understand simple orders, they began to help, not as kindness, but as duty, fetching water, gathering firewood, caring for younger siblings, chasing animals away. Childhood and labor blended very early. Children worked in fields, kitchens, workshops, stables, mines, and later in factories, not as exceptions, but as a silent rule. Being small did not mean being spared. It only meant receiving tasks suited to small arms, but equally exhausting, equally repetitive, equally draining. Young bodies bent early, small hands grew calluses, small backs learned pain, and no one called this abuse. They called it upbringing. Most children would never learn to read. School was not a right, it was a privilege. Knowledge came from watching, failing, repeating. Learning meant making mistakes until survival happened. Mistakes were not seen as part of learning. They were seen as disobedience, and disobedience was corrected with blows, shouting, humiliation. Fear was an educational tool. Children belonged to the family, especially to the father. They were not viewed as individuals with their own will. They were extensions of the household, the land, the workshop. Many children grew up with near constant hunger, not the kind that passes, but the kind that stays, the kind that lives in the stomach, the kind that teaches you to eat slowly because there may not be another meal. Clothes were inherited, torn, too big, too small. No one thought about children's comfort, only about covering the body. Some children played, yes, but play happened in the gaps between work, hunger, and exhaustion. It was not protected, not encouraged, not considered important. Children saw death early. They saw younger siblings die. They saw neighbors buried. They saw small bodies carried away in silence. They learned very young that existence did not mean safety. When a child became sick, often there was no treatment, only waiting to recover or waiting to die, and no one called this neglect. They called it fate. Wars, plagues, and famine created waves of parentless children. Some were taken in. Many became forced apprentices, servants, beggars. Others simply vanished. There were no reliable records, no organized searches. A missing child was rarely looked for. The world kept moving. Girls could be promised while still children, not because they were ready, but because adults made agreements. Small bodies served large deals. Boys were shaped early to produce, not to choose. Their value did not come from who they were, but from how much they could yield. Either you were too small to work much, or already big enough to be treated as an adult. There was no middle ground. Being beaten was part of upbringing. Shouting was part of education. No one called it cruelty. They called it discipline. Parents loved their children, but showed it little, not from lack of feeling, but because loving too much made loss unbearable. More children meant more hands. More hands meant more production. A child's worth was measured in usefulness. A child who reached adulthood was already considered a survivor, not an exception, but a quiet victory. Wealthy children had more comfort, but they were not free from punishment, arranged marriages, disease, or control. Few books speak of them. Few names were written down. Millions passed without leaving a trace.
I saw children with small hands and tired eyes, saw children rocking babies while adults worked. I saw children understanding far too early how the world truly worked.
Perhaps the most impressive thing is not how much they suffered, but that despite everything, they grew, they lived, they carried families, cities, worlds.
I saw children without childhoods. I saw children become adults far too soon. And if there is something I learned, it is that the past never releases the hand of the present. Time keeps more memories than you imagine, and I still remember many of them.